A fighter pilot receives orders to identify a mysterious airborne object. The airman obliges, giving chase to something he cannot readily explain. The pursuit takes him higher and higher until things take a sudden tragic turn, and the plane disintegrates in midair, the brave pilot meeting his end without ever knowing just what he was pursuing. Fans of classic creature features will recognize this harrowing sequence of events as one of the best scenes in the 1956 Kaiju spectacular Rodan. But it will also be familiar for students of UFO lore, as it represents one of the most widely publicized incidents in the history of their field, and the resemblance, we shall see, is no mere coincidence. Some months ago, I brought you the story of the Hopkinsville Goblins, a highly noted case from my own home state of Kentucky. Today, we'll look at another famed UFO encounter from the Commonwealth, an intriguing and heartbreaking story that would help inspire one of the greatest monster movies of the 1950s. I'm Tyler Martin, and this is Monsters from the Id. The trouble began at 1:20 p.m. on January 8, 1948. The tower at Godman Army Airfield, Fort Knox, received word from military police that the Kentucky State Highway Patrol were getting reports of an unidentified flying object heading in that direction. Shortly thereafter, numerous individuals in the vicinity, including several of the brass at Godman, observed an airborne object which appeared to be either motionless or moving at a very slow rate of speed. At 2:25, a flight of F-51 Mustangs en route to Standiford Field in Louisville flew overhead. The flight leader, Captain Thomas Mantell, was asked to investigate, at which point he began a spiraling climb in an attempt to intercept the UFO. He was accompanied by two wingmen, while the fourth plane, being low on fuel, proceeded on to Standiford. The flight climbed to 15,000 feet, with the wingmen breaking off shortly after, citing failure of oxygen equipment aboard one of the aircraft. Mantel thus continued the chase alone. He reportedly stated that he was going to continue the ascent and attempt to close in, and if unable to close the distance at 20,000 feet, he would discontinue the pursuit. By 3:15, radio and visual contact with Mantel was lost. Within minutes, a witness on the ground reported that Mantell's plane circled 3 times like the pilot didn't know where he was going, and then started into a dive from about 20,000 feet. About halfway down, there was a terrific explosion. The aircraft hit the ground at a farm near Franklin, Kentucky. The pilot's body was subsequently retrieved from the wreckage, the first casualty of the Kentucky Air National Guard, and the first person in history to die while pursuing a UFO. By all appearances, Captain Mantel had lost control of his plane due to oxygen deprivation and died in the ensuing crash. Military regulations at the time required the use of oxygen when flying above 14,000 feet, but Mantel, who reportedly had no oxygen equipment on his plane, exceeded that altitude by a considerable margin. In the years since, many have accused the captain of recklessness, which is not entirely groundless. Why a seasoned pilot and decorated war hero would so blatantly defy regulations at the risk of his own life may always remain a mystery, though responsibility should also fall on his superiors for not ordering him to abandon the pursuit despite the obvious danger. But just what was he chasing? At a cursory glance, this whole business might sound quite extraordinary. Some writers, all too willing to jump onto the sensationalist bandwagon that often accompanies UFO reports, have cited second- and third-hand accounts that Mantell radioed that he could see people in this thing, or that the object fired a beam which shot down the ill-fated plane. These stories are not corroborated by any reliable source and cannot be seriously considered. However, official investigators initially did little to dispel the confusion. In contrast to the refreshing candidness seen in recent years with regard to unidentified aerial phenomena, the Air Force in 1948 was very eager to seize upon any banal explanation in the hopes of making the UFO problem go away, and the Mantell case was no exception. Complicating matters, a series of other sightings had occurred in the same general vicinity on the same day, from Clinton County Airport and Lockbourne Army Airfield in neighboring Ohio, of a bright object in the sky whose position and general behavior strongly indicate that witnesses were observing the planet Venus. Seeking to wrap all this up in a neat little package, the powers that be thus asserted that Captain Mantell had perished while trying to reach Venus. But when compared against eyewitness reports and the opinions of astronomers consulted on the matter, this answer, however official it may have been, proved quite untenable, and it would be some time before a more believable scenario was put forward. Project Skyhook was a Navy operation of which Mantell or other witnesses would have been unaware at the time of the incident, as it was classified until a few years later. This project involved the use of high-altitude balloons for meteorological observation. Made of highly reflective polyethylene and capable of reaching altitudes in excess of 100,000 feet, these balloons were confirmed to have been launched in neighboring areas around that time. Considering this, along with descriptions from witnesses at Godman Army Airfield and elsewhere, there can be little doubt that Captain Mantell died while pursuing a Skyhook balloon, with which he was unfamiliar and was positioned at a much higher altitude than he realized. Official reports on this incident contain enough discrepancies to make a conspiracy theorist's head spin, but the overall thrust of the story can be readily ascertained, and the facts speak for themselves. While I personally believe that not every UFO sighting has a mundane explanation, in this instance there is no real indication of extraterrestrial activity or sinister cover-ups. In all likelihood, this was a Skyhook balloon. Although its cause has since been explained, the impact of the Mantell incident is undeniable. It was one of the most prominent UFO events of its day, generating considerable public interest and, owing to its unfortunate outcome, a more serious view of the phenomenon, which had until then been treated whimsically, even scornfully. Readers all over the world would be gripped by this intriguing case. In fact, the readership of this notable incident from Kentucky extended as far as Japan, drawing interest from writer Ken Kuronuma, a native of Kanagawa Prefecture, where I now make my home. Kuronuma was a prolific researcher and author who specialized in paranormal phenomena, and had also gained some repute as a science fiction novelist. Toho Studios, high on the success of its first two Godzilla films, hired Kuronuma to pen a story treatment for another entry in their giant monster cycle. Given his personal leanings, it should come as no surprise that the writer would draw from the world of the unexplained, ultimately using the Mantell case as a starting point. Kuronuma's story tells of an unidentified object appearing over Japan, which is subsequently pursued by fighter planes. Far from a top-secret research balloon or the planet Venus, however, this UFO turns out to be Rodan, a mammoth pterosaur awakened from its eons-long slumber beneath the coal mines of Kyushu. The Mantell incident is hauntingly reenacted when a lone fighter pilot dies while attempting to identify the object. In another likely nod, the UFOs are spotted in various locales around the same time, giving rise to speculation that there may be more than one. The finished film is a skillful blend of science fiction and horror, wherein director Ishiro Honda and special effects guru Eiji Tsuburaya combine claustrophobic dread with dazzling spectacle and, in the end, an almost shocking degree of pathos. Premiering in December of 1956, Rodan captivated audiences and has since earned a place among the finest monster movies of its day. And while the story ultimately diverged quite dramatically from its origins, its genesis in Kentucky's most tragic UFO encounter only serves to enhance its appeal. It's always fascinating to find little-known connections between different areas of interest, and this is one of my favorite examples. If you'd like to see a deeper dive into the film itself or have other requests, please feel free to sound off in the comments. I'd be glad to hear from you. And if you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to give it a like and subscribe for more monsters from the id. As always, thank you for joining me. I'll see you next time.